And what we want is for volunteers to step up and support grassroots candidates and recalls to ensure that we have choices for better candidates year after year. The more people that join us, the closer we will come to a critical mass, where we can also use the initiative and referendum process to assure that the candidates who are in office have to abide by rules, ensuring accountability, transparency in their actions, and so that we can limit the possibility for corruption in the first place. Join Free and Equal and join independent individuals who are running for office across the country.
Occupying didn't work because it's asking the same politicians who created the problem to suddenly be responsible enough to fix them. They were given campaign contributions to be corrupt, and so no amount of protesting or sending letters to the congressman is really going to get them to change their ways. The way to change the system is to occupy the elections using initiative and referendum, recall, and nomination.
Hey, Nicholas. Hey, thanks for showing an interest in putting together this documentary about direct democracy. I mean, it's fantastic that you're putting energy into this because this is really an important issue of today. I've had several experiences that led me to want to put together this website called Occupy the Elections. And the first experience was soon after the war in Iraq. Like a lot of people, I was just totally upset because I knew, I'm 60 years old, so I was a teenager during the Vietnam War. And when this whole setup came around for the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, it was just so obvious and so blatant that this was going to be a national disaster, another tragedy. And so I thought, what can I do? I mean, I marched with millions of people, just like I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this video, and I felt so frustrated that there was nothing that could be done to stop the war machine and that we had to go through this whole experience all over again, just like in Vietnam. So I came up with this idea of putting some crosses across from the BART station in Lafayette, California, right next to a major freeway. Some friends of mine own the property. So I got together with some friends right after the war started. We built some crosses. We put them up on the hillside. And the visceral response from the community was just amazing. I mean, the police came by and stopped us immediately and said, do you have permission to put crosses up here? What is this, some sort of protest? Literally, a few neighbors came by and started screaming at us, screaming epithets at us like, you guys are such traitors, you're going to hurt the troops, this is such a demoralizing, thing. So, and then that evening, the crosses that we did put up were torn down by vandals. So I sort of became disheartened right away and gave up on the idea. And then several years later, the tide started to change, and it became really obvious that there were a whole lot of people in the community who were really opposed to the war and realized that this was a total mistake, and we were fed a pack of lies, really, about why we had to go to war. So I contacted some local peace groups, and before I knew it, there were hundreds of volunteers literally coming out and building crosses and putting them up on this hillside. And the image of the crosses of Lafayette has gone viral over the entire nation, over the world, really. And it turned out to be a very successful project. We call it a peace memorial, and it's gotten attention from far and wide, and there are many people who come to the memorial and express gratitude that we sort of waded through this process of free speech. And we had a whole process of going to the city council and talking to them, and there were confrontational counter demonstrations against us for doing this. And lo and behold, after a while, the Crosses of Lafayette became an accepted institution in this community, so that if you mention the Crosses of Lafayette to anybody, they know exactly what it is, what it stands for, that it's a way of really expressing our concern for the true cost of war. And if you remember, at that time, the Bush administration was blocking any sort of images in the media of soldiers coming back in body bags. They wouldn't even allow the media to go to a funeral of a soldier that had died. And so by putting 4,000 crosses on the hillside, it really had a dramatic impact. And so that got me thinking about grassroots initiatives. There was such a hunger for people to express themselves in some dynamic way that would actually make a difference. And the number of people who just sort of came from nowhere to participate in this project was unbelievable. So later on, I started to think, well, what can we actually do to change the core misconceptions that we have about how to govern our society? And then the Occupy movement began to happen, and that was just incredibly exciting to see all these people occupy public spaces and work at developing a system of coming to a consensus about how we want to govern our society and sort of develop some rules to make our democracy actually work, so that there's much more of a feeling of living in an egalitarian democracy where we're working together to solve some of these tremendous problems we have in front of us. And you know, there's so much discouragement out there, and there's such a feeling of it's not worth being involved in the election process. And that's why I wanted to put together Occupy the Elections, because I believe it's really setting potentially a roadmap that could really change the dynamics of the whole election cycle. Yeah, it's tremendous. What we've done at Occupy the Elections is come up with a really simple way for a lot of people to participate and be able to put an initiative on the ballot at a very low cost. Typically, it takes a special interest group that can easily raise around $2 million to put an initiative on the ballot. And yet, if you think about it, there are a lot of really common sense ideas that we could propose in an initiative that would receive a broad level of support from both conservatives and Republicans, from both libertarians and progressives, that we really need to be talking about and debating in the typical election cycle. And yet those initiatives never seem to appear, because who's going to spend that kind of money? So the idea that we have on distributing the workload is that we request that 50,000 people sign up and commit themselves to collecting just 20 signatures each to put an initiative on the ballot that would change the Constitution in California. Now, if you think about it, it's an incredibly efficient way to do it, because what you're saying is you're looking over the initiatives and you're saying, okay, I'm willing to go just collect 20 signatures. I mean, how hard is that? You go to a party, you go to a family get-together, and you should be able to collect at least 10, 20 signatures right there, depending on how many people are there. I mean, the initiatives we're talking about, many of them are so common sense that it's almost ridiculous. That term no-brainer comes to mind. And so, but the thing is, you're not committing yourself to do anything until 50,000 other registered voters sign up to also go out and collect just 20 signatures for the same initiative. So this is a totally different approach. We're not dependent on raising a lot of money. We're not dependent on those few hardcore activists who are willing to spend every weekend standing in front of the local supermarket. I mean, if there was a few people like that that want to join Occupy the Elections, then that's great. You can go collect hundreds of signatures or thousands of signatures. But really, we need to all do our part. And so making a commitment to doing a small part, each one of us doing a small part, is the way it needs to happen. Because that's really what democracy is about. We can get up in the morning and moan and complain about the news, but we really need to start using this social media, this modern technology, to actually begin to participate and do something about it. So what are some of the initiatives at Occupy the Elections that would help restore jobs? One of our initiatives is called Buy American. 30% of all economic activity is generated by the government. When our government spends our taxpayer dollars, we want that money spent on American-made products. If this idea were to catch on, it would bring back millions of jobs that have been sent overseas. After that, we have an initiative called Invest in Main Street. Why are we sending billions of dollars in state pension funds to Wall Street when we could be investing those funds in our own state. By investing billions in our own state, it would make our local economy much stronger. With a healthy economy, we can depend on the tax revenues we need to modernize our aging infrastructure. Another important initiative we are promoting is a state bank initiative. Keep in mind that every time you borrow money to buy a house, buy a car, or start a business, around 50% of all the money you borrow eventually goes right back to the bank to service debt. I mean, talk about a ripoff. Now imagine if all the bank's profits went right back to the taxpayers. Our money should go to work for us and not for Wall Street scammers.
Voters in North Dakota used the ballot initiative process to create a non-profit state bank system. They are the only state in the country that has nullified the Federal Reserve. They do not owe debt to the Federal Reserve. They have not involved themselves in fractional reserve banking. They did not have a housing bubble. They are the only state in the nation with a surplus, and it's because they are sovereign. Debt from lenders goes back into the state, not into offshore investments.
State bank. State bank is something that's catching on. Right now there's one in North Dakota. They've had it since 1919, and they were the only state that didn't have a budget problem when the global meltdown. North Dakota. Now there are like 17 different states that are looking at it in one way or the other. They can be a state-owned bank, a public, city-owned bank, county-owned bank, and what happens is that they partner with the local banks and the credit unions and make good loans to students as well as homeowners and small businesses, and then it charges them less interest and fold that money back into the state. So it's investing in California, not in Wall Street. So a state bank.
Yeah, keep the money local.
Keep the money local, yeah. Partner local, invest local.
It's so the cities are investing in the credit union, because alone, when we, the people of the city, and put our own money, that's great and all, but when they're taking all of our taxes and putting them into the Bank of America, Wells Fargo, that's when we have problems, right? What we need to do is have the city, like in Oakland, Jean Quan, instead of doing business with Wells Fargo and Chase and Bank of America, she should be doing business with like the People's Federal Credit Union over here. It's called Western Federal Credit Union, right over there.
There
OG
you
Plaza.
go. Yep.
You know, wouldn't that make sense? It's in OG Plaza.
Yeah, it makes sense if you're on the side of the 99%.
Yeah.
You know, if you're on the side of the 1%, then this junk makes sense.
All of the initiatives at Occupy the Elections represent common sense ideas that we believe a majority of voters will support. We want a more equal society. We want more local democracy. We want jobs and a sustainable environment. Up until now, the chance of these types of initiatives ever appearing on the voter's ballot was very low. But here's the key. If you see an initiative that you like, then send us an email with a commitment to collect just 20 signatures for that initiative. Once 50,000 other registered voters also agree to collect 20 signatures, then we will send you an email with instructions on how to proceed. This simple approach will practically guarantee that once 50,000 supporters sign up, then the initiative will be on the voter's ballot during the next election cycle.
The goal of Activism Truth is to help people do what Jeffrey Heaton is doing in California in every state that has ballot access. Furthermore, in states that don't have ballot access, the goal is to unite and organize people for effective lobbying campaigns to put political pressure on the representatives to enable stronger ballot access rights.
The world needs politicians in Western countries, and I say Western because they have all the influence. Yeah? All right? The world needs a Western direct democracy because politicians are never going to make the decisions that need to be made. For one thing, they don't have the will. They're being bought left, right and centre. Secondly, I personally don't believe they have the power, even if they have the will, to do it. By operating from within a partisan system, from within a party in a partisan system, it's all gone, it's all over by then. This is the thing about partisan systems. Partisan systems themselves are responsible for the start of civil wars. You look at any country over the last 200 years and any civil war, what's it been about? It's been about what minority is going to rule them.